Hi, Textbook Adoption Committee. Thank you so much for agreeing to represent your school in the Textbook Adoption Committee. It's a lot of work that you've signed up for and a lot of responsibility. And I really am proud of the team that we have pulled together. And I know that we're going to select a great textbook. Thank you for logging into the Canvas course and getting started on your asynchronous training. There's going to be three pieces. This piece is making sure that the textbook that we choose aligns to the best standards. There'll also be a piece on how to use our rubric to evaluate the textbooks. And then there'll be a piece from instructional materials on the process and the paperwork of being a part of this important process. After each of the modules, there'll be a discussion board where I'd like you to use the discussion board to, of course, ask questions, but also please use the discussion board as a place to say that you've watched the video and understood what's being asked. So with that introduction, let's get going. The best standards have been adopted by the state of Florida. They will not be implemented for the 21-22 school year, but they will be implemented for us for the 22-23 school year. The textbooks that we're looking at have been developed with the best standards in mind, and we'll be using these textbooks primarily with the best standards. So we need to get a working familiarity with the best standards so that we can choose the correct textbook. With the help of Ms. Page and Mr. Wells in professional development, we've combed through the best standards over and over and pulled out what we thought are the most important textbook adoption look fors. I do encourage you to look at the best standards on your own, and they'll be linked in this Canvas course as well. The standards are student-centered expectations from which all curriculum, instruction, and assessments are based. Curriculum is how the standards are incorporated into the classroom. So what we're adopting is a textbook that's based on the standards. The curriculum is also the instructional materials. Instruction is, our pedagogy, our strategies to implement the curriculum and standards. And assessment is how we provide feedback to teachers, parents, and students. And so we're going to ask ourselves, does the textbook thoroughly and consistently support the standards throughout curriculum, instruction, and assessment? The best standards have a new coding scheme. We're used to RL, RI, W. What we have now is F for foundations, R for reading, C for communication, and a new one, V for vocabulary. EE are the ELA expectations. Those ELA expectations are the expectations that run K 12. Here's an overview, and we'll be asking ourselves, does the textbook we're looking at effectively address and support all five strands? The foundation standards are an opportunity for us to have standards based instruction to help students fill in gaps in their literacy. The reading standards are a lot like the RLRI standards that we're used to. The communication standards are a lot like the writing standards that we're used to. We're adding in the vocabulary standards, and then we have the K-12 ELA expectations. And we'll be talking together, making sure that the textbook that we adopt effectively supports all five strands. Here's an overview of the ELA expectations. K-12 will be teaching how to cite evidence to explain and justify reasoning. K-12 read and comprehend grade level texts. Inferences, appropriate collaborative techniques, active listening skills, accepted rules governing a specific format for quality work, and appropriate voice and tone when speaking or writing. So these are the ELA expectations K-12. The way the state and Just Read Florida define these are the overarching skills that run through every component of language arts. They're skills that students should be using throughout all five strands. For the purposes of instruction, these expectations are interconnected and should be developed over time. And there is an appendix to help us with the ELA expectations for students and also text complexity. And so it'll be really important that we choose a textbook that includes ELA expectations throughout, since that's the way these expectations are expected to be infused throughout our curriculum. What else is new in the B.E.S.T standards? Our rhetoric will be introduced earlier, now during sixth grade, so that students will have an understanding of the appeals, logos, pathos, ethos when starting argumentative writing. So we'll need to look at the middle and high school textbooks and ask if they effectively address rhetoric. The B.E.S.T standards have a focus on historic time periods. The idea being that students will learn to understand literature more successfully when they understand the context in which the literature was created and read. And so the historic time periods for grades 6, 8 are listed here. We'll need to look at the textbooks and ask ourselves if there's representation from these time periods in the book. For 9, 12, it's the same historic time periods with several new ones added. Uh, Ms. Page, Mr. Wells, and I dug through the standards trying to find some delineation of which periods were supposed to be 9, 10, 11, and 12. And as of yet, there doesn't appear to be guidance in that. That's something that we'll need to develop. But looking at the textbooks, we'll want to see that the historic time periods are represented. The B.E.S.T standards emphasize reading across genres, emphasizing figurative language, paraphrasing, summarizing, and comparative reading, and of course, rhetoric. And so we'll want to make sure that the textbook effectively addresses the reading across genres benchmarks. There's an appendix to the B.E.S.T standards, Appendix A, that has a very specific demands of what we're looking for figurative languages, rhetorical devices, etc. Obviously, it would be beneficial to our teachers and students if the details in the appendix are also covered in the textbook. Benchmarks, benchmark clarifications, and appendices represent the expected outcomes and are designed to be user friendly. So, like a ninth grade teacher can't just look at the ninth grade benchmarks. You have to look in the B.E.S.T standards. You have to look at the ninth grade benchmarks and the appendices. So, before we adopt a textbook, we'll be looking at the appendices closely and then asking, okay, the appendices are more detailed. Does the textbook cover these details? The B.E.S.T standards continue to emphasize the importance of writing, just as we have in the past. When we look at the textbooks, we'll want to make sure that reading and writing standards are intertwined. We'll want to make sure that the written tasks require students to confront text directly, draw on textual evidence, validate inferences from the text, and use standard conventions of English. And of course, we'll be looking for argumentative, explanatory, and narrative writing tasks. And so our textbook look for is, are the writing tasks clearly and effectively aligned with the reading selections? Here's our vision for high quality instructional materials coming into Alachua County. And so we'll be asking ourselves, does the textbook consistently align with this vision of the B.E.S.T standards? And here's a review of the questions. I'll be quiet and let you peek at it. As you probably saw, this slide is a summary of all the questions that we asked throughout the slideshow. Thank you for taking the time to take a step into the B.E.S.T standards. Please remember to mention in the discussion board in Canvas that you've watched the video and or reviewed the slides. And of course, I recommend that you take this opportunity to dig into the B.E.S.T standards and read through your grade level. Please feel free to use the discussion board for follow-up questions about the B.E.S.T standards. And of course, please feel free to contact me with specific questions. Thank you for your time. And I believe the next module will be a review of the rubric. Thank you.